Well, today's episode is brought to you by Savvy. Savvy makes reliable, safe, and good-looking AV equipment mounts. Justin and I have both used Savvy mounts on multiple different jobs that we've worked on, haven't we?
Yeah, more than I can count.
Yeah. So Jeff, who owns Savvy, exceptional guy, but he makes even better products. Sorry, Jeff. But Savvy makes camera stands, speaker mounts, mic holders, custom solutions to eliminate the worry in your AV situation, because AV equipment that's poorly built can cause stress on you, can cause stress on your volunteers and your team. So ultimately, you want to have AV equipment and mounts that are professional grade, they're customizable, and you can use them reliably, safe. They're great looking. I mean, the welding on these things is incredible.
Yeah, they're super pretty. I know that like on integrations that we do, like finding the perfect like TV mounts and stuff like that, when you find those that are just easy, clean, and they do exactly what you need, I stick with them and I never change. And that is what we do with Savvy now.
Yeah. The camera stands that Savvy makes are exceptional. They even have a place for a drink holder for your Starbucks.
And your little ClearCon pack. So you don't have to like have it like pulling your pants down.
Right. So you can check them out. Check them out at www.savvyus.com. Again, that's www.savvyus.com.
Woo woo, Savvy.
All right.
We just let it go.
So Nate, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
So today, we really wanted to talk about computing and mobile computing as a whole. I think the future, where we came from and where we're going, I think obviously where we came from is important to talk about a little bit.
Sure.
But more so, I think where we're going is a really interesting thing to talk about. And that idea of what does mobile computing look like today? What have been the advances that we've all seen, recently? And where do we think that's going to go next? And I would say we probably can't say much more than the next 5 years, right? I mean, we can think about maybe what the next 10 years or 20 years looks like, but I don't know if 20 years ago we would have thought where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, think about when the iPhone came out in 2007. There's no way in 2007 we thought we were going to be where we are today. I mean, that's what, 13 years ago?
Yeah.
So I mean, when I think about mobile computing, I think it all goes back all the way to like mobile calculators, right?
Sure.
Like people used to shell out, $600, $800, $1,000 for like, check out my HP calculator and like, I'm going to do some math here. So, I mean, I think that kind of progressed on to, remember those little folios that like were dictionaries? Like
yeah.
The pocket
the pocket dictionary.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kind of a palm style device.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'd have these little cards that you could like load in, a thesaurus or whatever your thing was, if you were a writer or if you wanted to look up information. So I think that kind of started to move computing a little bit closer to the person.
Yeah.
Because it used to be that you had to like go to the Encyclopedia Britannica and like crack it open, to look up information. And, that progression, I vaguely remember that actually went to, they had these like versions for kids that would like let you message between them.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
Like almost like precursor to text messaging. So I think that, when you look at this stuff, there were always very early versions that, kind of emerged and then became more of a product.
Right.
The Palm Pilot, the Pocket PC.
Yeah, the Palm Pilot.
Oh, man.
What movie was I just watching? And like the guy's like pulls out his Palm Pilot and he's like doing something on it, and everyone's like, "Whoa, what is that?" And I'm like, that's like super funny. And my wife's like, "What is that?" Like I've never even seen.
She's never seen a Palm Pilot?
No.
Oh my gosh. So when you brought up the calculator, it's funny. So we, especially in college and high school, if you were on an engineering track, you had a TI-84 or TI graphing calculator, right? And I figured out early on in college that we weren't allowed to. So we would have these open book tests a lot of times, but the other ones we had in college, I figured out in my science class that I could put all of the answers to my test in the TI-84, but I had to have the calculator to be able to do my test. So they couldn't say no to us having it. It was, so I had all my notes in the TI-84. I can't tell you how long it took to manually type in on a QWERTY keyboard the notes for an exam in college. However, it was so worth it because it was one of the few tests I passed my freshman year. Well, it's one of the few I took, actually. Sorry.
The 84 didn't have a data cable like the 86?
I don't I don't know, or I just wasn't that advanced at that point. I'm not really sure.
I don't.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't remember which one of those calculators I had in high school, but I remember we hacked it and put games on it.
Games.
Oh, yeah.
What was that like? It was like a Space Invaders.
You could play
version.
Pong on it too.
Yeah, the Pong one. But there was like, do you remember there was like a Space Invaders version of a game on there? We used to like flip our calculators upside down because like how the buttons were and like how the screen looked. And our math teacher was like, "What are you guys doing back there?" We're like, "Just doing some heavy duty math." Yeah. And I mean, and he was
after it.
like, he was kind of like whatever. Like he didn't really think about those kind of things. He was also the math teacher that like wrote everything on the chalkboard, like everything on the chalkboard. So like no overheads, no computers, no nothing. Like it was chalkboard, not whiteboard, chalkboard.
Overheads.
Yeah.
Future.
Yeah, right.
Erasable.
Yeah.
That was high tech stuff.
Was. Yeah, I agree that there was this moment, and it seemed really exciting, like that era of the fact that you could send a message on a pager too.
Yeah.
At one point,
Absolutely.
seemed like this unbelievable, groundbreaking technology that we had really never seen before.
Like on body messaging.
Right.
Yeah.
That was mobile, and that was kind of at the advent of the cell phone as well. But it's really interesting, and I think a lot of the conversation we're going to have today surrounds the fact that the point at which the phone became a mobile PC or computing device, right?
Right.
And I don't think Apple was the first of the game in the fact that you had a computer in your pocket.
Yeah.
I would say BlackBerry was probably the earliest. Would you agree?
So Research in Motion, they were the first to market with a modem that could work over a cellular connection.
Okay.
And that kind of enabled this, like, hey, we're going to have some sort of low-speed networking happening between a device that's on you and, the greater network. Because, I mean, prior to Research in Motion, coming up with that modem, integrating it into their BlackBerry, kind of flagship first smartphone, if you really want to call it that.
Sure.
The starting point of that, I mean, back to the Palm, right? People would synchronize their email, every day, and then like, oh, I'm going to read my email at lunch, and then you'd have to plug the thing in and synchronize, for your responses. So, I mean, it really closed a gap, and I think it started this. I remember, seeing a BlackBerry for the first time and realizing the implications of like, wow, like I don't have to go check my email. Like it used to be. I mean, you remember?
You had to take time out of your day
Yep.
to go find a machine, join the internet.
You've got mail.
Right.
And
so
then you hear.
that's kind of a terrible representation of that sound.
No,
but-
you could totally hear someone talking because you were trying to connect to the internet and they were on the phone.
Oh yeah, that for sure. So I Googled this quick while we were talking about this.
Yeah.
The first smartphone was made by IBM. It's called the Simon Personal Computer.
Okay.
And it's a pretty bizarre looking thing. I don't remember ever seeing one of these in the real life. Have you seen one of those before?
Sure have not.
No?
What does it look
Nate,
like?
have you seen one of those? Really?
Yeah.
So that's pretty bizarre. And there was a pretty big gap. Like that was 1994. And then you kind of fast forward to some of the stuff we remember, the BlackBerry Palm age of stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then immediately into the iPhone.
I think the first legit smartphone that I remember like seeing and going, whoa, was the BlackBerry Pearl.
Okay.
You remember that one?
Yeah.
That was
Is that the one with the trackball on it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a Pearl trackball,
Yeah.
which is why it was
Yep.
called the Pearl. But it was like small, it wasn't anything super special. But
I
like,
remember that one. Yeah.
that was just like the first one that I remember going, oh, like that was like really popular. So a lot of people have it.
2006.
Yeah.
Released it. So what I'm interested to know then is around that time, when would you consider like remember the original Razor and stuff like those?
Yeah.
I wouldn't consider those smartphones though. They weren't necessarily internet
Feature
connected, right?
phones.
They were feature phones.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was
The first web connected phone had to have been.
Technically, the iPhone was a feature phone when it launched.
really?
Yeah, because it didn't have the App Store. I mean, like
Oh, true.
Steve Jobs was pushing JavaScript mobile big.
Okay.
Like right from the beginning. Like it was all m.blah.blah.com. Like you'd do it in your browser.
Okay.
And
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
And then kind of like, remember when the Xbox launched, it didn't have Xbox Live right out of the gate.
Yep.
It was like they realized, wait, there's this second layer of monetization we
Yeah.
can turn on.
Oh, what did we do? Because before Xbox Live, there was like a third-party like hack version. What was that called?
X-Link Kai?
Yeah, maybe.
That was one of them.
I don't remember. We used to play Halo 1 on it all the time. And then when Xbox Live came out, I remember our friend Dale Talsma was playing some motorcycle game on Xbox Live.
Yeah.
And he was talking to someone because the free ones, you couldn't talk to them.
Yeah.
Like you could just play. You join the games or whatever.
Yep.
And I was like, who are you talking to? He's like, I don't know, some guy in like Japan. And we're like, what?
I mean, and we were far beyond dial-up at that point, right? I mean, we were broadband internet to be able to allow
Yeah, I think we were
peer-to-peer, that kind of network gaming, right?
Yeah, we were low DSL, I think, by that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cable modems were out too.
Yeah.
At that point.
But I do remember, kind of going back to the cell phone thing, I remember our friend Ryan had this T-Mobile, or maybe it was an AT&T phone, where you could like customize your ringtones.
Yeah.
It was the first phone that ever let you do that.
So you could play like a song you liked for your ringtone? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I just remember going, oh my God, that is amazing. Like I wanted that phone so bad because of that specific thing.
And then people figured out how to monetize that.
Yeah.
And it all sucked.
Yeah.
But remember ringback tones?
Yes.
You had to pay a lot of money. A lot of money.
A lot of money.
Yeah, that wasn't cheap.
No.
So, walk down memory lane there.
Yeah.
But when we look at mobile computing today, and a lot of the reason why I wanted to have this conversation is I've had this tin hat theory for a long time, that the line between personal computing and mobile computing has consistently been blurred to the point where one of my business partners was here in Grand Rapids with us one day, and he dropped his Samsung Note 36 or whatever the new
I think it's a Note 10
is. Yeah, Note 10 into a dock, right? And he was threw it on a USB-C monitor and had a wireless
Desktop
keyboard and mouse,
environment.
and he was using it, and he was running AutoCAD on it. He was running a whole bunch of different stuff.
Yeah, so the cool thing is like my iPad Pro here, I can run a full version of AutoCAD and a full version of Photoshop on it now, which is insane to me. But I know, and I don't think Apple's the only people that have this, but I really tend to pay more attention to them just because that's the company I like a little bit more. They have some patents that are in for essentially a like MacBook Air that has it's only battery, and like you would slide your iPhone in, and it would click in, and then your iPhone would become the trackpad.
Oh, okay.
And then the monitor and the battery and everything would become like a laptop. So it's like you have this laptop that's a shell, you click your iPhone into it. That way you're not having to like do all the syncing and all that kind of jazz. It's all just one device.
Right.
I think that's a really interesting thought process.
Yeah, it is. And I think some of the key that, Nate, maybe you can speak to this a little bit. And I don't think we've, in a minute, I'd love to have you tell us a little bit about your history, because I think your, like, who you are and what you do for a living is really interesting to why we're having this conversation.
Sure, absolutely.
But so we don't get too far off topic with what Justin's saying right now, the chips that are coming in, so the A-series chips that are in the Apple products, right?
The Bionics.
The Bionics. And then we go to this new M1 chip. But they're all, for the most part, the A-series chips that you were seeing in the MacBook Airs before and all of that are sharing both CPU power, RAM, and video RAM all within one chip, correct? Mm-hmm. Is there a drastic difference between the M1 chip that has just come out? Because I think that's clear. I think, to me, that's Apple's next step to again, blurring that line a little more. Yeah. What kind of difference is there, if any, between the architecture of the M1 chip versus what we've been seeing in the current platforms?
Sure. I think that from an architecture standpoint, you're seeing convergence happen on a lot of different levels. Mm-hmm. A little bit about what we were talking about with like the gaming stuff. Even now, you watch this kind of oscillation between the silicon that they're using being kind of more general purpose and more specifically built for the need. And I think that you watch this oscillation that goes back and forth. And I always find that really fascinating, because there's only upside for us as consumers or for us as creatives or whatever. And I mean, that's what we're seeing happen with Apple. I think that, you look at the reduced instruction sets that these mobile processors and the M1 and the system on chips that Samsung's using, you're tending to find that there's some benefits. There's kind of like a more of an optimization mindset that's going in. And in more traditional CPUs, it's the complex instruction set. It's like everything in the kitchen sink.
Right.
And in many cases, you don't need that. Or in many cases, it's too power hungry. Like it'll eat your battery or it runs hot, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that when I look at this, it's really fascinating because you see this convergence happening, and the kind of outcome that comes from it is going to kind of drive that next wave of stuff.
Right.
And, when you look at phones these days, it's battery life and camera quality that are kind of
and that was, I was going to ask you, when I've explained this to a lot of people before, and I think you and I have had this conversation about, we all have been fortunate enough to live through the tech curve. And the rate at which we get data, the rate at which we can process data, all of those things have done this kind of curve that's like this. And when you're in an exponential curve like that, I think that we lived through this. We saw that drastic turn from a very slow rise because it's exponential to what is almost vertical. And at some point when you're almost vertical like this, if you look at the net processing power from 6 years ago and today, I don't think we've made huge leaps and bounds in our ability to do that. I think what we've made huge leaps and bounds in is the ability to manage power efficiently, which allowed for more cores or more things like that, right?
Yeah.
And so the individual processor hasn't made a big leap in its ability to process data. What, in my opinion, we've made leaps in is the ability to run multiple processors to do that on the same amount of power draw. And that trickle down technology, if you want to take it from like an F1 mentality, because I'm really into F1 motorsports and all of this, is you have, billions of dollars spent by Mercedes and Ferrari and all of these companies, and within a decade it trickles down into vehicles that we're driving.
Right.
And I kind of look at it that way within the chipsets, that we have very, very, very cheap chipsets now that are processing more powerfully than we even saw 4 years ago.
We just threw away like 4 computers today into the dumpster because they were worthless.
That were like i5s and
i3s,
right? i3s and i5s,
but they had like 4 gigs of RAM.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was a time where that was appropriately spec'd.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think what we saw. My first compact had a gigabyte hard drive.
Can you explain what Compact is for the
Compact?
people that
Yeah,
don't know who that is?
I guess that's not a company that exists anymore, is it? But it was actually, and what's funny is,
was it next to your Gateway computer?
Well, so Gateway, Dell, and Compact were kind of the
big three.
The big three at the time, and they had physical brick and mortar stores to sell computers.
I remember the Gateway store. There was a Gateway store on 28th Street over in Woodland.
Yeah. I think there's a Mr. Car Wash there now.
Yeah.
That has all changed. But again, I don't think our ability to process data in a single thread has made huge leaps and bounds.
It depends on how you look at it, right? If you go back to the Pentium 4 days of desktop processors, those things were being fabricated at 160 nanometers. So very tiny, very small. Like put it under, like an electron microscope, to look at it.
Yep.
And now you're looking at current generation chip fabrication, it's sub 10 nanometers, right? So the exponential levels of shrinkage, right? People use the term nanotechnology,
right?
Really
loosely.
It's like a buzz term, but like what you're carrying around in your pocket is like that level of miniaturization. There's going to be a point where they can't fit more transistors onto, a single, tiny little, area of a piece of silicon.
Yeah, and so we're probably verging on that. So now, and Justin and I have had this conversation many times while traveling and stuff, but the idea that maybe it's a shift again about what we're doing in size and everything, and it's intriguing because there was this race for a long time to have the largest mobile computing device. And we're not completely out of that on a level, right? When we talk about cell phones as a mobile computing device, we'll take away the iPads and stuff.
Big phones.
Right. But then you have a new evolution in that technology. And so before you share with us about that, let's talk about that evolution of size, because I think you possess on your person right now a pretty wide, broad range of that evolution of size.
One of your 9 phones that you own.
I'm a little phone addicted. I'll admit it.
But are we, because we've hit that point where the line is so blurred between an iPhone and an iPad.
Right.
I mean, I literally find myself, I own iPhone 11 Max, whatever.
Pro.
Right? Yep, Max Pro. And then I have the smaller iPad Pro from what Justin has. And I'm like, so much of what I do still, like I'm thinking about going to a smaller phone so that I want to use my iPad more, because my phone is a little too small for some things, but just right for others. And my iPad is a little awkward for some things, but just right for others.
Yeah.
I think what I like to do on this iPad is kind of what the commercial says. And I remember seeing the commercials before I got it and going, I'll never use it that way.
Right.
And I'm like, this is my laptop now. I use this when I have to type long emails out. If I have to type an email that's longer than, the automated response that Gmail gives me, then I'm going to sit down and I type something out, or I'm writing show notes for this podcast or my other YouTube channels. I'm sitting there typing that all out on my iPad. I don't do it on my MacBook. I don't do it on my Mac Mini. I do it on my iPad. Excuse me. Yeah, so it's just it's funny because it is a computer now. It's not a tablet like it used to be, this it's a big version of your phone.
Right.
Now it's a small version of your laptop.
So do you think, Nate, that share with us what you have there and the little phone. So maybe we start with the little phone that you have too.
Yeah.
To understand the evolution of technology, because I want to talk about why we think this technology has been implemented, holistically.
So this is the Samsung Galaxy Fold.
Okay.
Or wait, this is the Flip. Excuse me. That's the Fold.
Okay.
So the material science here, this is a OLED screen that flexes here in the middle.
Yep.
Right. And it's amazing to me that the material science, is allowing us to kind of get back to these interesting phones, right? I don't know if you remember. Do you remember the taco phone? Everybody called it the taco phone.
Who made it?
So it was Nokia, and it was called the N-Gage.
Was it the one that you opened and then you had a keyboard?
Well, it was a gaming phone that ran these little game cartridges, and it had a D-pad and all of that, and a little screen.
Yeah,
I'm looking at it now.
It kind of looks like a Dreamcast almost.
Yeah, like the little Dreamcast screen that would pop out of the controller.
That was a phone?
But you'd hold it edgewise to your face.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't hold it flat against your face like this. You'd hold it with the edge. So it was a really awkward phone.
I mean, essentially, it was a futuristic version of the Zach Morris phone from Motorola.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that was a Motorola phone, the big chunky one that from Saved by the Bell. You never watched Saved by the Bell?
No, I didn't.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, really.
That's weird.
What's that look for?
What's wrong with you?
It really took me by surprise. I have to be honest with you.
I mean, who hasn't watched Saved by the Bell?
I'm familiar with it. There were just so many shows growing up that I don't know. They just didn't resonate with me.
Who is the tall girl from Saved by the Bell?
Jessie.
So when she did that Showgirls movie, I want to say I was in.
Yes. Oh, I know totally what you're talking about.
So I was in 6th grade, and I was I would assist with the high school football team at that time to do the ball boy. And I remember all of the high school football players talking about going, if they were 18, they could go see Showgirls, right? But they were like, it's Jessie from Saved by the Bell. And I was way too young to understand a lot of what they were talking about. But I was like, she's in a not safe for work video. I guess as we would say now.
I don't think I've ever seen that movie not on TBS. And even when it was on on TV, I don't think I ever fully watched it. I remember flipping channels when I was a kid, well, not a kid, but teenager, and going, "What's this movie?" And I'm like, "Oh, I know that girl." And then I'm like, "This is boring," and flipping it.
By today's standards, it's mild. But at that moment, like when that came out, that was a big deal.
Yeah, wasn't that NC-17?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, that was a major rabbit trail.
Top end of the ratings there.
But yeah, so anyway, the flip, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
And then you have the fold.
So yeah, this thing is the flip, and then you've got the fold, which is kind of like the larger brother.
Okay.
To that one.
That is a freaking massive screen when it's fully open. Can you open that fully?
It's pretty much like.
Can you turn it on?
Do you find that? Okay, so I'm really intrigued about a couple of things on that. The form factor of that really bugs me. Do you find that you want to have it in a semi 16:9 mode?
I mean, when you're on YouTube fills the screen.
Cool.
And when you're playing a YouTube video, let's see here.
But what about when you're searching like the web or using what's your in-app experience?
Well, I was gonna say, can't you fold it like you just had, and it's like essentially a Nintendo DS?
Yeah. So you've got an exterior screen as well,
like a normal phone.
And so if you open up an app,
which I'm not gonna lie, kind of like that form factor.
Then when you open it up, it continues.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But you have no. Yeah. Okay.
Can I see it?
Yeah, sure.
So what is the but let's say like non-optimized apps for that phone, what are they like?
So the only app I've come in contact with
Can you unlock it for me?
That is a problem is Instagram, excuse me.
Okay.
So this is Instagram on here.
Yeah.
So I will say that like the fold, like the physical crease, I feel like I was like nervous. Like every time you showed it to me, like I could see this giant crease, and I'm like, that would drive me crazy.
You can feel it with your finger.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. Like
if there's a glare on it, that bugs me, but it doesn't this way. See, this is interesting because this would be. I just don't like. I want the experience to be this way.
Yeah.
Does it not adapt that way?
So I think there's an auto rotation feature that I have shut off.
Oh, why would you not want that? That feels more natural, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than getting someone else's phone that's on like rotation lock, and you're trying to turn the phone, and you're like, "Why is this not working?"
Let's see here.
Nate, do you think?
Can I see the flip while you're doing that?
So before I get there, so you have 3 different sizes, and they're all somewhat exponentially smaller than each other. But you have a TCL product, correct?
Yeah.
So TCL bought Palm, you told me?
They did.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's essentially like a smartwatch that's not a smartwatch.
Okay.
Because, I mean, you can get connected smartwatches.
Yeah.
But then what you can do with them is very much limited to that screen size and ecosystem. And so you're starting to see this emergence of like second phones, where maybe
But you have a third phone. How does that work?
What do you mean I have a third phone?
Do you have multiple different numbers on these phones?
So originally I had my primary phone, and then my Palm phone is my secondary phone. And currently this is my primary and that's my secondary.
Okay, so your Palm phone's like useless right now.
I mean, if I move the SIM over to it, it would come to life.
So as far as the carrier is concerned, that's a watch?
They have companion lines, and I mean, like...
sorry, I'm not trying to get you in a legal situation by this question.
There are open access clauses, that Verizon has as far as like plans and lines. And
Let's just say theoretically, if you were on Verizon, would that be technically your phone? If that was a thing?
I mean, it is.
Or
my phone number is unified between the...
But how are they pulling that off? Based on the parent-child scenario, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're using a connected devices plan, which is like a secondary plan. T-Mobile has already kind of gone into that more so than other people. And I'm trying to remember what they call it. I think they call it T-Mobile Digits, where it's like you've got your primary phone and then your alias phone. And the idea is you can, have a better device, for work, and then a smaller, more portable device for the weekend. Or
with the same phone number.
With the same phone number, yep.
Okay.
Without paying for, 2 massive plans.
Because I have dual SIM, so I have an eSIM and a regular SIM. So I have 2 phone numbers on this phone that are fully functional.
Yep.
So what do you? And I think this will get us to a goal in the conversation. But what is the use case scenario for you in terms of size of phones? Like, why do you decide one over the other?
Like driving decisions on selecting a phone?
Yeah. Like not selecting because you buy it. Like selecting why do you use this one today and that one tomorrow, or vice versa?
Some of it's battery life. Some of it is.
So how terrible is the battery life on that thing with 3 screens?
Not bad at all.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a lot of batteries in there.
You could easily get through, a day and a half with that.
Okay.
Does that have another display that's covered up by the case?
So it's got a little outward-facing notification
That
display.
one.
If you tap on it, it'll wake it up.
Is there an LG version of this phone that's similar?
Oh man, I'm trying to remember.
Because I feel
wing.
like maybe that's what it was. I feel like there was an Unbox Theory video where he had one where like you closed it and it like had a forward-facing like display, so you could take a selfie with the main camera.
So here, I'll show you how to get the selfie mode on. So you have this, volume button on the side.
Yep.
Come on, let's see if it'll actually do it. Hey, there we go.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Samsung is infamous for making these little, slightly gimmicky things sometimes. So I had a Samsung watch that had a camera in it. That had
kidding.
It had
I vaguely remember
absolutely,
that
positively
thing. Yeah.
no viable use, right?
Right.
Like, who's going to take a picture like this? Like, hey, Nate, I'm going to take a picture of you, right?
Yeah.
Not usable.
Selfies.
Yeah, but the camera was total bullshit. Like, it was so grainy. It had terrible low light performance.
Bro, have you seen some of the like cameras in some of these like really shitty Samsung phones? Like I'm talking about like not the Galaxy or the Fold like series. I'm talking like you go to Sprint and you get a free phone.
Yeah.
Like have you seen some of those?
Yeah, but that was probably good. On some
No,
level.
I'm
Do you remember when they put a?
I think the original iPhone had better camera.
Okay.
Remember when they put a small mirror on the back of the phone, so that it was like a little round circular mirror, so that when you were taking a selfie, you could see your reflection.
No, I don't remember that.
Yeah,
That's a new one for me.
All of the feature phones, or a lot of them, had that.
Okay.
And this was prior to front-facing cameras.
Right.
Front-facing cameras are relatively new
Yeah.
in the mobile space.
Yeah.
But
So let me bring us back real quick. So there's a question that I think you asked and we didn't really answer. And I think I'm old enough to remember how popular this device was, but I don't remember why it was so popular, and that was the Razr from Motorola. Why was that phone so popular?
it was the iPhone before the iPhone.
And it was
Right.
thin.
Was it because it was thin, or because it was was it the first feature phone?
All metal design.
It was chic. Like,
Yep.
when you looked at it, when it was completely folded, it was the thickness of a standard phone.
Mhm.
And when it was open, it was half the thickness of any phone in the market or more, right?
Yeah.
Like, at that point, feature phones, Blackberry was the leader, probably, right? And those phones were not thin at all.
Bricks.
Yeah.
Nor were they sexy. They were very business.
Yeah.
You had the full keyboard.
Yeah. I remember bosses
you
on my
had to
having those.
midget fingers to use the damn thing, but yeah.
That was it. That was the whole reason.
Materials. And I mean, the operating system was really good for its time.
It was.
I mean, you were talking about this was the emergence of picture messaging.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that phone, I mean,
They ran Outlook natively.
Yeah, it had a mail synchronization client in it. Yeah, my first, you could call it a smartphone, was actually a Nokia, and it ran the Symbian OS. It was a Series 60 phone. It was a Nokia 6620. And I love that phone. I mean, it ran actual applications. It would synchronize email. It had a web browser, and I mean, and it would do it over, at the time, Edge. Was the fastest connection you could.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
Over cellular, and it's been really interesting to watch the emergence of those changes. Some of it is kind of on the UI UX side of the experience, and some of it is more like the material aspect of things. Like, how did they construct the phone? How does it feel in your hand? Because I mean, everybody remembers their earliest cell phones. You drop it on the ground and the plastic parts would fly apart. If it was a Nokia, you'd put it back together and go right back to business.
I had a red Nokia that I threw multiple times in a fit of rage. I was really mature at that time.
Bro, I used to like hacky sack my Nextel back in the day.
And then I would like snap it back together and keep talking.
But I mean, the thing that keeps reemerging into my mind that's so interesting. So Research in Motion, they were a company of engineers. They came up with this cellular modem. It enabled the BlackBerry empire to emerge. You had Motorola. I mean, Motorola's been around in radio technology forever.
Sure.
They emerged into cell phones, and then as cell phones miniaturized and became more advanced, they built an empire. And I mean, now, in present day, both of them are just a hollow shell of what they once were.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's fascinating to me to see how they launched the industry and for whatever reason, they couldn't stay pace with it. And I think that, even more recently, Google bought Motorola Mobility, and it still just couldn't cut it, know? So, I mean, when we're looking at the space that we're headed into, there's another major cycle of innovation that's coming. Some of it is going to be the material science of the devices and, crazy interesting stuff like that. What is that?
This was my first feature phone that I had, and it was
a media phone.
Yeah, dude, check this. So it had an MP3 player in it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see it from there.
Yeah.
It was the first phone, I believe, that you could put a micro SD card in
to load music.
Into it.
Yeah.
I mean, the sound from that speaker was the worst thing ever, but you had portable music.
Right?
Yeah, my first iPhone, I would turn up and leave in my room and listen to music on it, which by today's standards, I'm like, wait, I can't even hear it.
Yeah. So you had the Razr. Do you remember the Rocker?
Yeah.
So the interesting thing there was Motorola, because of their clout, they were able to go to Apple and say, hey, Apple, we want to do a licensing deal with you, and we want our phone to talk to iTunes. So that was like the first phone that like synchronized with iTunes natively. And it was a miserable phone. And I mean, it was popular for the time. But I mean, again, you're watching this really interesting shift or convergence where people are like, no, I want my music with me. And I don't want to have to carry around 2 or 3 things to do that.
So what's the limiting factor as we sit here today in the phones that you have there, right? Because there's different form factors, and we can talk about the form factor.
Yeah.
But what's the limiting factor to what Justin just talked about, the idea that I essentially load my phone into a physical larger screen / combo keyboard?
Yeah.
Like, why aren't we there?
So we are and we aren't, right? So both of these phones support what's called Samsung DeX, which is a desktop environment. You plug in and you go, but they haven't really brought it forward into kind of like the mainstream, because there are aspects of it that aren't ready. There are aspects of it that you're like, wait a minute, I'm just opening up a mobile app into a window, and now I have multiple windows open, kind of a thing.
Right.
In some cases, though, you're seeing, Microsoft starting to embrace it.
But the Windows Phone is kind of dead. Am I wrong?
What do you mean?
Like that it doesn't really exist.
Oh, yeah. Microsoft gave up on that.
Bill Gates pretty much said the biggest failure he ever had was not embracing the Windows Phone and going after the market with Apple at that time.
Yeah, I think the inflection point was the iPhone, because it started to bring forward kind of a creative mindset or thinking that's like, hey, I can conduct my entire life out of one device.
Right.
And I think that...
I mean, it's even more true now.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, I mean, if I didn't have a computer, I could technically survive on my phone.
Yeah.
Like email, phone calls, FaceTime. I mean, I can create things. I have photo editing on there. I have graphic design on there, communications on every level that you can imagine.
But there's still a limiting factor. So everything you just said and everything you've just said, to me, we still have this breakdown of why can you still not use that, right? Or why can you still not use that as your complete solution? And it's this... We're in a middle balance or a middle place right now, in my opinion, of the idea that there's iOS still, and then there's OS 10, and yes, is that gap narrowing? I think it is.
Well, and I think Apple's M1 chip is kind of their gateway to that.
That's how and why. I mean, seriously, that what I'm still questioning is, when I look at the fact that a MacBook Air is running the same chip previous to the M1 that my phone was. Yeah. And my experience on a MacBook Air was quite nice. Okay. And so why has Apple not taken OS 10 touch compatible? Because in my opinion, they want to drive everything to iOS.
Yeah.
Right. But we still have, nobody can, and from a Android based standpoint.
Sure.
They don't have the ability to run full full-on versions of AutoCAD, things like that, right? Because we have these professional, in this is a precursor, or this is me baiting you both in that. Is it the professional world that is holding back the rest of the world
Yes.
from being able to be fully mobile computing? Because of the fact that we have to have apps like Pro Tools and AutoCAD and, all of these things that, let's say Excel, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You can all say that Excel is fine on a mobile computing standpoint, but actually really deep macro-based and high computing Excel documents will not run on mobile Excel. So, but where is that used? Again, in the high professional world. The average person does not run those.
So this is the thing. The question you asked is very multi-layered, right? I think some of it is on a business level, cannibalization, right? So if you have product A and product B, if product B starts to take off, now you're taking the legs out from underneath product A.
Right.
And I can tell you this, you can see it very vividly with Apple that they're trying to be a mobile first type of organization. Mm-hmm. Whenever you listen to any of their public information that they release, they're putting all of their resources behind the mobile devices. You look at Google, Google and their products and services that they're offering it's a very mobile first type of situation.
Which is consumer first.
It can be, absolutely.
I mean, and so where do we fit in? Because we all sit in a realm where we work in the professional realm.
Yeah.
And I just used the word realm twice. Don't love that. Anyway, but yeah, the idea, I guess what I'm getting at is that we had Justin and I had an interesting conversation with a colleague of ours who we worked with. His name's Chris Bednar. That was the previous episode to this, about this unification or consolidation in AV of all of these different esoteric different things, right? And we bring all those things together, but the AV industry has had to learn how to play nice with everything, because we were very proprietary in professional AV or professional things like that, and we've had to condense. But as an IT professional for you, there's a certain amount of the world that you have to be able to do in terminal or,
is it a real computer?
Right.
That's what I hear you saying.
Right. Because could you do your job as a professional IT person from that phone?
So this is the thing, right? They refer to this as like trusted computing or like walled garden computing.
Okay.
When you're on these devices, you're kind of bound to the app stores that they have. With Android, you can do what's called side loading, where just like you'd have an exe on a computer, I can have a Android package and I can run that thing and side load it in.
Right, because I've never bricked a Fire Stick before.
You know exactly what I'm talking
side
about.
Loading,
side loading.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's that element of it. Do you have the ability to run an unsigned application? Because like Microsoft had their Surfaces, I believe Surface RTs, that only loaded from their app store.
Right.
And they were abysmal. Like Best Buy couldn't give them away practically.
No, I mean, they were terrible.
So but there's that element, so if you're an application, developer, do you need to have the blessing, from Apple or from Microsoft to just be able to execute some code? Right. And some of that's security, some of that's convenience. I think the other element of this is when you're looking at a mobile device, right, you use the term consumer first, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, there is a kind of just pull it out, sign into account, load your stuff and go. You don't need to know really anything about computing to be able to get started. And I think that Apple really was one of the earliest companies to really push for that. They wanted to make the computer more personable. And I think that we see an extension of that still happening today, where it's like you can hand this thing to a kid and they're just like, oh, okay. And they're off to the races.
But are we going to be in the cold someday?
So this is the thing. The other day when you had your Motu interface that you got and you started rigging it up, to the iPad, and you were delighted that this application, it was just working,
without a firmware download or a software package or anything. Yeah.
So I think that kind of the monolithic IT or the monolithic approach to technology, it is going away. But at the same time, people are still going to need the know-how and the savviness and kind of like the strategy behind it. So I think that that's never going to go away. I mean, I just think that like the barrier to entry on some of these things is going to continue to open up, which I think is a huge opportunity for people like us because, you know, it used to be that some of these cameras that we have here, you know, you couldn't get your hands on them if you had $20,000. Yeah. And look what we're sitting here and doing today, creatively, expressively, you know, from a value add type of standpoint. So I think that, you know, it's funny that we're, you know, getting into these bigger and bigger pictures, but like the digital divide, there used to be a very wide chasm between the haves and the have-nots.
Right.
And now you're watching technology advance, and eventually that gap is going to completely close. And I mean, you're talking about everyone will have the same kind of digital opportunity as everyone else. And I mean, I get excited about that because I think that that's where, like, you know, the next eBay or the next Apple or the next Research in Motion will emerge from, you know,
right.
That type of industry disruption. You have to remember that, like, you know, Bill Gates, you know, walked in to IBM and licensed software that he practically didn't even have in his own hand. And it kind of single-handedly like launched Microsoft. And so I think that, you know, I'll give you a perfect example. I was at Jersey Mike's right by M6. And, you know, this kid that was making my sandwich, you know, I asked him how his day was going. And I forgot how he ended up telling me, oh, I told him, you know, I did IT work. And he's like, oh, yeah, I've done some mobile application development. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. And he kind of, you know, revealed to me that it wasn't that he gave up on it, but he moved to Michigan and just hasn't really messed with it. And, you know, I made this comment to him like, man, remember me when you're a millionaire someday, you know, kind of a thing. Because you have to remember that, like, when the iPhone launched, there were people that created an application out of their kitchen. And, you know, now they have like 100,000 downloads, you know, with like a $2 profit on like every download. That's substantial.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, the types of opportunities that exist, they're not going to go away. They're just going to change.
Is there going to be a bigger chasm between things like Linux-based, you know, applications and the consumer? Because, you know, we just talked about how the gap is narrowing between what's consumer and what's professional. And then there's kind of the like expert high-end professional. If that line completely gets blurred, and we've talked about this on other podcasts with Jesse and with Scott and with everybody and with Chris about how the gap between consumer and professional has narrowed and is narrowing to the point where you can create music that sounds really good in your own home.
Yeah.
Right. And you can do
Post-Malone.
high-level computing in your own home. I mean, to think about what it takes currently to run things like, I mean, even on the low end Fortnite, but let's talk about higher end, like some of those other gaming applications. It's insane.
Right.
I mean, I think about it like this: is that 15 years ago, like that machine right there blows away any machine that came out 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And the fact that a video editor, like someone who like wants to do film on their own, they can sit here on a Blackmagic Pocket camera that shoots 6K. They can buy a $4,000 MacBook, and they're $6,000 in, and they have probably more computing power and more filming capacity than someone who had $100,000 worth of equipment did 15, 20 years ago.
Right. But is that gonna open up the gap to the point where the real pro computing, the real like that we're gonna separate and we're gonna be left behind? I ask this because are we gonna be left behind by Apple and by
behind, like in what way?
Like from a professional AV standpoint.
I think that the first company that will leave us behind will be Apple.
And I say AV, but I'm sorry. I mean from a professional computing standpoint, high level, right? Are we going to be left behind by both Windows and Apple because they have been able to take the low-level consumer and the high-level consumer, almost midline, like what we would call prosumer, and merge them into one thing? Mm-hmm. And that's all great that we've provided this access to people who know nothing. But where do we go for the people who are Nate, right?
Yeah, so for me, what I see is like people like my parents, like my dad and my mom were both like, I have to have a laptop. You know, like I need to spend like $2,200 on a laptop.
Right.
And I was like, buy an iPad Pro. It's like $1,300. And they're like, but it's an iPad. I can't do everything I need to do. I go, what do you do? Tell me what you do. My mom was like, well, I check my Facebook. I check my banking. I do email. And I photo edit.
Yeah.
And I said,
Right. They didn't even need a Pro. Why don't you just go buy like baseline iPad?
yeah. I'm like, you literally could do
And get a
all of those
keyboard.
things. Yeah, and then get a keyboard for it. So I think that those people outnumber us significantly. So think about this. Like there's 3 of us sitting at the table. Okay. I would consider us all pro users. Right? How many people in our direct immediate families have computing devices that are not considered pros?
Well, you're bolstering my opinion right now, which is that we're going to get left behind by the major manufacturers of these products.
Right. So I think that
as power users.
I think that Apple will be the first company to do that because Microsoft, in my opinion, and Nate, tell me what you think about this because you've dealt with them more. Sure. I hate Windows. Drives me absolutely bonkers to use it.
So this goes back to the statement I was making about democratization, right? I think that, you know, anything that kind of looks and feels like it's up on the top of the mountain, you know, this corporate mountain,
right?
And like normal people have to crawl up this mountain and like beg, you know, to be able to like gain access or be able to do things. That's melting away. You know, like during these the interesting time that's 2020. Don't want the YouTube algorithm to like kick in on that.
Oh, we're okay.
But this interesting time that's 2020, right? You're having people shift to working at home. And like these monolithic systems and ways of doing IT don't really work well in that mode. And, you know, organizations, you know, that you know, I do work with, you know, it's just fantastic to watch people just seamlessly go, oh, yeah, I'll sign into that at home. No big deal.
Yeah, they're moving to Teams and things like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you look
Google
at
Workspace or Workforce or whatever they're calling it now.
Right, or Salesforce, or, you know, I mean, there are all these different types of applications that are starting to blur the boundaries and the board. It's becoming borderless, right?
Right.
And I think that, you know, yeah, that can look and feel kind of scary to someone who's used to kind of seeing the more, you know, department-driven, you know, IT corporate-esque type of way of doing things. But let's face it, you know, as we shift computing closer and closer to us as individuals, as people, it does pull away from that mode. I mean, you know, I remember, you know, people talking about how they didn't like Blackberries back in the day because it meant that corporate data was leaving the corporate network.
Sure. I mean,
You know?
didn't we have that whole problem with when Barack Obama had a, I think he was the first president to have a Blackberry and it was a big deal.
Well, it wasn't a
Right?
Blackberry.
No, it wasn't a
actually.
BlackBerry. He was the first person to not have a BlackBerry.
Oh, okay.
And that was the big deal.
Okay,
Because
got it.
BlackBerry had this like the presidential like phone that is like
see.
the most encrypted phone on the planet.
So that was a custom-made device.
Right.
Okay.
It looked like a BlackBerry, but
Got it.
I mean, it was basically a one-off device. That
Sure.
Who knows what kind of encryption it was actually using?
Yeah.
But it was protecting that data. But again, you know, you're talking about like not just like state secrets. You're talking like, you know,
Yeah, worldwide.
national secrets or like national security type of stuff. So I mean, you know, we're entering this interesting world, and I mean, and you know, to not get off topic, but like, you know, you've heard, you know, Congress, you know, just, you know, screeching about this company called Huawei, you know, and like, no, we can't use that infrastructure here because it comes from, you know,
From China.
from China. Yeah, exactly. And so there's all of these emerging things surrounding security and information access and, you know, how you protect those things. But at the same time, people's expectations are everything, everywhere, all screens, all devices. And I mean, you know, like putting it really simply, like when I was a kid, I had to get up early on Saturday morning to enjoy my favorite cartoons, right? And now, like, you just like hand your phone to your kid, and then they, like you were
On
saying,
demand.
they swipe through what they want. Bam, they get.
Yeah,
what they,
we were talking about how I had to buy a screen cleaner for my TV because my kids touch my TV constantly. So this actually was in my living room for a while, and I bought a new, bigger version of this TV. And my kids, because they're so used to touch, will like when we're like looking for something on like the Apple TV, they'll walk up and go no, and they'll touch the screen and try to swipe. on my TV.
It's like, come on.
Touch first.
Well, it's because think about it. They all have Fire tablets.
Yeah.
So they all just swipe through. You know, my 3-year-old knows how to navigate my wife's phone.
Right.
You know, so he's like swiping through, choosing what he wants to choose. Everything is touch. I'm on the phone with my wife this morning, and this is not the first time this has happened, but this is the first time, like, for some reason it clicked in my head, where my son's like, "Daddy, why can't I see you? Why can't I see you?" And
He was
wife,
concerned.
and my wife's like, "Because we're just talking on the phone." He's like, "Yeah, why can't I see his eyes?"
So Blake says that all the time. Like, I'll just call Carrie just when I'm traveling all the time. And, hey, whatever. And she's like, and Blake will go, talk to daddy. And she'll hand him the phone. He's like, where are you? It's sound, son. You could just hear me.
Listen to the sound of my voice.
Well, I said to Nate to earlier today, because it happened this morning on my way into work, and I'm like, man, our kids are in that first generation, really, in my opinion, where that 1985 commercial that Apple did when they, like, it wasn't called the iPad, but like it was the iPad commercial when they like had the idea.
Right.
You remember that? Our kids are going to be that generation now, where it's like
They're the first fully connected generation.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's actually a thing. So it's a thing that they've talked about. We've talked about this on the
You guys
on the
remember
podcast.
going outside and playing with sticks
I know.
and using your
Like,
imaginations.
I beg my kids to play with sticks.
so the great thing is, like, I have been, like, this is really funny because, like, my wife when we got married, when we started dating, she was really concerned because she knew what I did, and she like knew, like, she's like, oh my gosh, you have a MacBook and you have an iPad and a phone and you have a smart
where's your off
speaker
switch?
and you have you know, like, your whole house is
He's
automated.
connected.
And she's like, I'm just really worried about, like, the kids, like, being overly, like, electronic indoctrinated. And I'm like, no. I'm like, we force them to go outside.
Yeah.
They're only allowed to use their, like, watch TV for so long.
Right.
Like, I'm very adamant about,
Screen time.
yeah, no, you go do this. You go jump on the trampoline. You know, you go play in the backyard. You know, go beat each other up in the backyard, whatever. You know, I'm very anti just, like, stick a tablet in front of their faces. And my kids are, so, like, my 2 bio children are very, like, they can fall asleep to TV really easily. So, and her 2, like, don't. So it's really, like, interesting because, like, mine will literally pass out watching it. And then, like, we'll have to, like, come and, like, peel their, like, the tablet off their face. And their kids, her 2 bio kids will be awake until, like, you know, midnight watching TV if we let them, type thing. So it's pretty interesting. But
I think you're hitting the nail on the head, though, about generational changes, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you saw, like, Apple, it's like almost like a master stroke that they got people generationally with the iPod, which was a computing device. Let's face it.
Absolutely.
It just wasn't connected. And I mean, you would synchronize it kind of like a Palm Pilot, download your music and download your podcasts. A lot of people are very much like, this is the way that I consume.
Dude, the first
we talked
time,
about the iPod video that you had.
Dude, the first time I could wirelessly sync my iPod to my computer was mind-blowing.
I live in the future.
So let's do a little poll between the 3 of us, and we'll start with you, Nate. I want you guys to give me, and I'll end this, one piece of technology that you're excited for in the future that has to do with mobile computing. Like, So you go.
I love it. Edge computing, right? As networks continue to enhance and the latency and throughput of these networks to your device gets better and better, you're going to find that, like, some of that gap that you were talking about as far as, like, full-size applications working on a very lightweight device with maybe a small battery, that'll start to be a thing because it won't actually be on your device. What's old is new, right? You're going to start to see. So, like, I loaded it up here. So this is Destiny 2 running on my phone. Well, it's not really running on my phone. It's running in Google's data center. And I mean, they're streaming it to my phone.
Right. So do you think a key to that technology is 5G?
So 5G is it's a marketing term, right? Gets people excited. It's
But
it's the new
is
thing.
really fast data connections the future to allowing what you're talking about to be a reality?
It's kind of a yes and a no. And the way that it's a yes is yes. Some of the lower latency is going to enable some of that.
God, you guys are killing me. You're taking my thing.
Dang it! I'm sorry.
It's
I can
okay.
stop.
How
keep
about this? I'll just say my thing, and then you continue your
Yeah.
thought.
Okay.
Starlink is the most thing I'm like the biggest like thing that I'm excited about.
Okay.
Well, because I mean that's opening up a layer of access in places where you couldn't before.
Yeah.
It's like whole Earth, internet enablement, and I mean that's really exciting. And I mean, I guess the thing is it's like so 5G really is more about keeping up with demand. I feel. Than making like your phone, run your life even more. I mean, it will allow for that.
But do we currently have fast enough data speeds on, let's say, 4G to be able to do what you're talking about?
So this is currently running on 4G.
Okay.
And if you put your finger here, there's an invisible, thing to move this way.
Yep.
And there's another thing over there. So this is over LTE. So you tell me if you sense a delay.
See, I think the difference, Josh, I think what you're thinking about is that these type of games where you're playing by yourself, you're going through like a campaign thing, I think 4G perfectly fine. Where you're talking about latency wise, the pings and all those kind of things, if you're trying to play Fortnite on LTE,
when it's peer-to-peer,
like that's going to be the problem. And I mean,
which is where I wonder where if 5G is going to be fast enough to handle that,
Yes. So 5G is supposed to be essentially the savior to mobile computing. So from everything that I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that 5G is essentially when it's like fully massively rolled out. Yeah, no, this is really beautiful. Yeah, this works like really well. 5G is like going to be the way for someone wirelessly to like operate on someone from across the planet wirelessly.
I mean, some of that is marketing. The thing that they're trying to get
do you
at,
not believe the marketing?
like marketing architecture.
Yeah.
Like
No, but that's not what I asked you though.
Yeah.
Do you believe that the technology is capable of what he just said, or do you think there's a systematic flaw there?
Well, the thing is it all comes down to application, right?
Okay.
Like currently where 5G is, the coverage and building penetration and all of that kind of stuff.
There's infrastructure for sure that needs to be deployed to make that viable.
Yeah, I mean, the 5G network that we have right now is not going to make that capable.
No.
So this is the thing. I mean, it in its current standing, no. But I mean, in the future, if it is as ubiquitous as they're trying to build it to be, yeah. I mean, you're going to like everything that can be connected will be connected. And I mean, at that point, you will start to see some of those really interesting benefits.
At a really fluid, like almost latency-free feel.
Yeah, I mean, when you start getting, I know you guys talked about Tesla, when you start talking about more of this automated self-driving stuff, vehicle-to-vehicle communication,
huge.
You're talking about milliseconds of like between someone being alive and not being alive.
So you have to have data transmission rates that are in the nanoseconds to be able to deal with life safety and all that. And that's... we never got to that in the Tesla episode to talk about what really would be the thing that allowed self-driving to be successful. It literally is what you just said, which is that peer-to-peer idea, but the ability to have vehicles connected.
Yeah. So I know that GM did this thing for a little bit of time, and I don't think that they could make the antenna strong enough and like accurate enough to like make it viable long term. But they essentially had it so that how like most GM and Ford cars have like the little indicators of, hey, there's someone next to you, like let you know that they're there. So they had, I think in the Volt, I don't know if it was the version you had or it was the one before, they had the big screen, obviously, where like they were trying to do that to the Malibu and to the Cruises, and where like if you had a 4-way stop and you have the car is like looking around, oh hey, you have a person here, kind of like what the Teslas do. But then, like, say another car that has the same thing pulls up at the same intersection, it would wirelessly say, hey, Nate, your car sees a person over here. So now I know, my car knows that there's a person on the other side of your car that I can't see, my car can't see. And it was, like, communicating so that, like, as I was going, I would know that there's a person there.
Right.
Type thing. And that never really took off, and I don't really know if that was they just didn't see it viable to make money, or if it was like kind of more of like a marketing stunt.
Well, like, you have to get every manufacturer to be on board with something like that to make it successful.
Some of those open standards do exist, but I think that like when it comes to liability, how does the liability work?
Who owns that liability?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The future
with
of
5G, no one owns that. So if your vehicle is 5G connected and it can tell real time in very, very low latency where you are.
Well, the reason they're using the marketing the way that they do is because there are inherent things about that networking or that level, that generation of networking that will allow you to essentially tier out these communications.
Okay.
So that there aren't these situations where a life-saving, protocol or transmission doesn't come through because there's like too many people in a
Sure,
stadium.
you can prioritize the data traffic, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of scalability stuff that's coming to 5G that will be the bedrock for all this kind of new higher level stuff. That's
we won't
coming.
go down this rabbit hole, but it's kind of like the AVB thing about this dedicated pipeline
Right.
for what's important and letting everything else that's not time sensitive come through.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think like kind of what we talked about in the Tesla episode the electric car episode with Scott is, that autonomous truck driving, like 5G being able to connect everyone instantly with like a full
telematics from that standpoint is insane.
Right. So like for my thing, like Starlink, like when you're driving through the middle of Montana where there, is no one living, why have cell coverage there? Why have data coverage there?
Well, and that's the methodology that developing countries have used as a whole, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was the most bizarre thing in the world for me in what was probably 2005 or 6. I was in Africa and I had better cell phone service in the mountains of Africa than I did in like Nashville, Tennessee. Yeah. And why was that? Well, because they just said, hey, why are we going to run the infrastructure to connect people with standard telephone lines? It just makes more sense to put up cell towers because that's a 100th of the work.
Right.
The last mile is in the air.
Right. So they're the most, like, developing countries tend to be the most connected countries when we talk about cell service.
Yeah, like our internet speed average in the United States is like still like only like the 8th fastest.
Right.
Like South Korea is like 10 times faster than us or something like that. I don't know if it's quite 10 times faster, but it's significantly faster. But what I was saying is like with the Starlink thing is going back to the autonomous driving, you have this autonomous truck driving, 500 miles to a depot where it's going to charge or whatever in the middle of Montana where no one lives, or the middle of South Dakota where no one lives.
Right. But Starlink provides that
right. And then, but what happens when the state decides, oh, that road hasn't been repaired in 20 years, we're going to repair it, and they start today, but my truck left this morning, type thing. And there's an update that gets sent out, but like that truck now doesn't have that downlink,
right.
or the connectivity to do that, type thought process where it's like you start thinking about that. And that's, kind of like a fringe like thought process, but it's just like the fact that now you have that capability of all of that.
Right.
You're no longer in the, like there's even in areas in this Grand Rapids area. Like I remember our friend Brian, when he bought his house in Hudsonville, he's kind of like on the outskirts of Hudsonville where he's like in the middle of nowhere, and he couldn't get like any sort of cable provider.
Right.
He could only get Sprint LTE. Like they would put like a dish
or
type
like
thing.
HughesNet or something.
Yeah. Where he had to have satellite internet.
Yeah.
And it was like, he paid, $90 a month for, like 2 megs down and it was like not even enough to run Netflix type thing. And that like Starlink fixes that thought process.
It does.
Can I circle back around?
Yeah.
Hold on. Before you start there.
Yes.
Or sorry.
Yeah.
I want to go with my third. No, you go. I'll go.
Well, so one of the things that really popped up into the front of my mind is a lot of people don't know what the most popular mobile application is. And believe it or not, it's Google Maps.
Okay.
And what's interesting about Google Maps is not only what it means to the consumer, but now when you're using Google Maps, you are essentially a sensor in Google Maps.
Yeah.
For traffic flow.
Sure.
I mean,
all that data acquisition.
Yeah. Like if you ever look up a restaurant, it will actually chart out how busy it is based off of Google Maps data.
Thank you, Waze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Google acquired Waze
Right.
because Waze was one of the only systems
Crowdsourcing.
that owned its own mapping.
Oh, okay.
Right. So it used to be that like Google had to license their mapping from Keyhole, and Keyhole was this company that had satellite imagery and mapping information and all of that, and they licensed it. But the problem is like, how do we keep this all up to date? Kind of like what Justin was saying. And some of that does come into when you crowdsource. And I mean, it's been very interesting to see the strategy surrounding Google Maps as far as linking businesses, so brokering people that are looking for businesses
Right.
or looking for services or food, or trying to navigate point A to point B and avoid traffic, or that whole thing. And I mean, what's emerged is a fantastic opportunity for Google to help people and to support businesses, but also make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there isn't a lot of public information on how much revenue they're actually making, but it's believed that Google Maps is making them the majority of their ad revenue because of how much people have shifted to looking for things and seeking things out on their phones.
I mean, it's literally because I travel all the time. I travel Monday to Thursday most weeks. If I want to find somewhere to go that's not a chain restaurant,
Yeah.
I go to Google Maps and I search food,
Yeah.
right? And then
I did that when I was in
literally,
Phoenix.
because and people say, well, why don't you use like OpenTable, or why don't you use
Urban Spoon,
or those types of apps? And I will, but they have much less granularity about my location than me seeing me and what's the most convenient thing for me to get to.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where Google Maps wins for me, is like the visual aspect of me and what I want to be at.
Yeah.
And I mean, I tend to find it's really interesting too, how all these platforms are trying to become each other.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Where it's like YouTube is trying to become Facebook, and Facebook's trying to become YouTube. And, Google Maps is trying to become Facebook, But the thing is that at the end of the day, I think that the bottom line that they're trying to aim for is this very interesting of how do we get to a value add. And I think that when you look at these different platforms, they all have their own unique value add. And as long as that remains strong, that platform will continue to thrive and emerge into something, more in the future than it currently is.
So I think all of those platforms possess the technology today and in the future that I was going to mention, which is AR, so augmented reality. And I think for me, the technology that I wanted to highlight that I think is the most immediate and the most relevant in the next couple of years, because we're seeing it implemented in the chips of the phones that you have, and the chips of the phones that we have, and all of this stuff, is this AR thing. Because the virtual reality thing has been around for so long. And yes, with Oculus and all these things, has it made leaps and bounds? It certainly has. But how we digest information has to change, because it's currently, it's a safety hazard.
It's digital well-being.
Yeah. Like let's just talk about driving, right? The way we currently digest information is from a physical screen that is outside of our field of view. Yeah. Which means that we have a problem. This is why this is why we see all of these laws about no physical devices in hands or on ears, no texting, all this kind of stuff.
Neuralink.
And Neuralink is interesting. I agree.
Just plug in.
There's so many other problems with that, both from we won't even go there right now. It's another episode.
Have you seen, it's an old Robin Williams stand-up talking about the future. He's like, someday we're just going to be like this. Let me turn you up. Hang on, let me take a picture.
And on some level, with the AR thing, that's a little true, right? But I think our ability to digest information fluidly and is the future right now. And I think that AR gives us that ability. If we can wear a device that allows us to see the world as we see it, but we can augment. When I turn around and I look at my fridge, there's a clock on my fridge. Yeah. And I can see, my Fox News updates over here. And when I'm driving or riding a bike, I get these updates that are visually not impairing what I'm seeing, what I'm able to do, but I also can digest at the same time. Because we talked about in an earlier episode about the fact that we have mastered the ability to deliver information to the individual. It cannot happen any faster. It really can't. So the only way that we can have a value add in that delivery is to allow it to be less distracting from
more
what we're doing.
context driven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And That's really why, to me, AR is the future. And I look at the chips that Apple's developing, I look at the chips that Samsung's developing. They all have this high processing power, because you're talking the ability to render a virtual object into something that is also GPS and or sensor tracked is intense when you talk about the amount of processing that it requires. And we're actually there. Like we're legitimately there.
So when I'm trying to remember where we were headed, it was one of our clients that had that space that was upstairs. I can't remember the name of it. In any case, we had to drive like across the state, and then I had to park in a parking ramp. Oh gosh, it's going to bug me which one it is. But in any case, when I got there, I'm like, I need to find my way from the parking ramp to this venue.
Right.
You know? And so I pulled out Google Maps.
Oh,
and
that prayer room?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Pulled out Google Maps, put it in walking mode, and then it notifies me if you hold up your phone, it'll go into AR mode. And when I did that, as I tilted the phone up, it put a breadcrumb trail out into the distance on the screen of my phone. And then as I would look around, it would show me.
And in large
overlays.
buildings, that's going to be the key. But that's going to be the ability to have that AR work. But it's going to take what we've just talked about. And if I want to come full circle to even a previous conversation, 5G, the ability to be high-speed connected indoors.
Yeah.
Without joining that Wi-Fi network is going to be key. The ability to have the processing power in the device to be able to render what you're seeing quickly and easily is key. And I think, wearables, but I'll even go beyond that. When I say wearables, like contacts that allow the ability, right, so an OLED contact, that, and I don't know how you power this yet. There's a lot of things.
I'm like, there's a level of like, I just sit there and go, I understand that, like, you think back in like the 60s when Star Trek was out and they flip open the communicator and people are like, man, that'll never happen. And then all of a sudden, like, Nextel comes out and you're like, bloop, bloop.
You're 100% right.
So I get that. And I don't want to say that there's no way in hell that will ever happen. But I go, how the hell are you going to power that?
Well, I mean, if we have wireless power, right?
So this
if
is
we go to the Tesla
yeah.
world of wireless power, then we're good, because if we have an OLED display on our eyes.
Yeah, no.
So futurism is exactly that. I think that when you start to dream up something that's beyond the scope of current reality, you start to creatively think about, well, how could it work if there were no limits?
Yeah.
And I think that
all I can think of is, do you guys remember when 3D TVs were a really big deal?
Yes.
Okay, do you remember? Yeah, do you remember
Well, they were never a really big deal, but I remember when they existed.
Well, I mean, they were a big deal for a very small piece of time. Like, I mean, the marketing made it a really big deal. Everyone wanted them and realized how terrible they were.
Right.
And then they fell off really quick. But there was the guy that was like, he put the nodes on his face. Have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so I'll have to send you guys the video. I'll see if I can find a link. He figured out a way to look at 3D things without 3D glasses.
Oh.
And so, like, he puts these, like, electronic nodes on his face, and it essentially makes his eyes blink for him really fast at different at different rates, and it makes everything 3D. I don't know exactly the science, but like there was multiple people that did it after this guy did it, and they're like, it's super painful, but it totally works.
I thought that was a meme.
No,
Like that it wasn't real.
No, it was real.
That it was like a joke.
No, it was real.
You're sure?
We will fact check
I am
this
almost
in the
positive.
notes, friends.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
No, it was like this crazy, like weird thing that he did. So
Okay, wow.
it's like a hacking thing. It's really, really bad for you, from my understanding.
Hopefully this isn't like the Rivian thing where Scott told us that Rivian was the one going out of business. And that wasn't true.
I mean, I would rather be wrong about this than blaming a company for going out of business. Scott.
Potato.
Yeah. Because who was it who actually went out of business?
I don't remember the name of him.
Oh, cool. We're really killing it right now.
I know. I've had like 4 people tell me, and I even looked it up. I was like, because I didn't think Rivian was. That's why I pointed out. I was like, well, I'm like, it's really funny because I'm like, why did Amazon just sign this massive contract with them? It was the other truck company that GM was working with. GM pulled out, not Ford.
Oh.
The Bolian?
No, not Bolian.
I can't remember the name of it, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I mean, and I think that that's the other thing too, is like we're entering a time and space where you're seeing investment money spent on things that aren't a sure thing, right? And I think that you're going to see kind of versions of
Nikola.
that.
Nikola, yeah.
Nikola. Yeah.
Yeah, they're gone.
Yeah.
They were the ones who rolled the truck downhill.
Yeah. And GM had just signed a big contract with them.
But like the concept of like, hey, we're going to take venture capital and we're going to throw it into something that's way outside of the norm and then see what happens, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it's a risk reward type of thing. And I think that you're going to see versions of that kind of stuff emerge with technology as it goes through its cycles of innovation.
But is that mentality not starting to just absolutely drive you like batshit crazy?
Not
Like,
really.
Oh, see, it really bugs me because I am such a, like, I have absolutely no propensity in my life for waiting for things. Okay. Like, it's not
Microwave
something I like.
generation.
30
Like,
seconds.
I am totally that, like, cliche, like, immediate gratification person. And the idea that, hey, like, Kickstarter is
Yeah.
my personal hell. Because I get
Because it's
so
not guaranteed.
excited. No,
Yeah.
because I get so excited about what they have. And even when I invest in it, then when I get it, it's underwhelming. I'll give you a use case example.
Okay.
You remember Coin,
Yeah.
the card that
Yeah.
was supposed to be the end all be all last credit card you ever needed
Yeah.
to own? You loaded your credit cards into it, had an OLED display on it.
It was a mobile computer.
Yeah,
To an
it
extent,
was.
yeah.
And this is why I'm talking about this.
Yeah.
Like this little card had a chip in it and I could go between my cards. So I'd be like, oh, I'm using my debit card. Doot, doot, doot. Swipe. Right. I was a Kickstarter and like OG Kickstarter on that one. It took almost 2 years to get the card. When I got it, it was the most exciting thing in my life. It worked 10% of the time.
Yeah.
If I was lucky.
Right.
I thought that's how Pebble was going to be, by the way.
And Pebble got bought.
Yeah.
And their technology moved on,
Yeah.
which was really cool. I also was a Kickstarter Pebble, by the way.
Okay.
But I got in that late, so my Kickstarter was like I got it like within a couple months. But like the Coin one, like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I was so excited. I had the app ahead of time. They had a great app experience. All of it was awesome until the physical deployment of using the card didn't work for shit. And the problem is a lot of their idea revolved around the tap to pay thing, which in the States we still just cannot seem to fully embrace.
Yeah, and I think that the reason why that's happening is because of how the companies charge for it.
Yeah, I know, but it's just worldwide tap to pay is a standard.
I know.
and
I
not
mean,
in the States.
I remember probably like a year and a half, 2 years ago, it was like the only place that had tap to pay was Meijer.
Right.
And then it was McDonald's and Meijer. And now, the gas station at the corner here has tap to pay. The gas station
everybody's
at the other corner.
getting there, but it's just business here. But anyway, I say all that to say, like, I agree. I think the future is that investment into the, like, I mean, people get excited and they put money into it. And like for me, I put a lot of money for me, $100 and some into a card that was a total failure.
Yeah.
I don't think Coin even exists anymore.
Yeah.
As a company.
I mean, to my knowledge of why it didn't work so well is they had to be an intermediary for you and all the cards that you were using.
Right.
Because, your credit card company wouldn't want another company to be like, hey, here's a device that'll let you clone a credit card.
Right.
And I mean, you see a lot of those same kind of security mechanisms going into Samsung Pay and Apple Pay, where when you try to link a card, there's all this verification that has to happen with your institution before the card is on your phone.
So if you have a corporate card, like that's a problem. And
Well, yeah, so it was even worse. So I remember when Apple Pay and Samsung Pay like first kind of came out, there was a girl at like, I don't remember, it was like a McDonald's or Burger King or something like that. Someone would hand them their debit card to pay for their meal, and she'd like scan it,
yeah,
and then like swipe it and then hand it back, and then like boop, boop. Like, I mean, that was credit card theft at like the most genius level for like a 17-year-old girl, type thing. And so now, because I remember like going, man, I don't remember having to like sign the life of my firstborn, like to get my debit card into my phone.
Yeah.
Type thought process. But
so Nate, I want to wrap up a little bit here, but
Sure.
In the wrap up, I think I'd love to have you give us some parting thoughts about just your thoughts on the mobile computing side, and then last part, I'd love you to share a little bit about just who you are and what you do, but
Yeah, sure.
but also how if people are interested in talking to you more outside of this, like, do you have social handles? Do you have, how can they contact you? How can they
Okay. Yeah,
get with
definitely.
you?
I mean, I'll just put it to you this way. I started really becoming intrigued with how things worked at a young age. Like my mom recounts this story of like, I'm like, I think I was like maybe 3 or 4, and I wanted to understand the plumbing under the sink.
Yeah.
So there's this picture of me like bent over, looking under the sink, like what's going on under
Was
here?
your crack showing a little bit when you did that? Because
That'd
it
be
should
really
have been
cute,
yeah.
but no, unfortunately not. Man, I could have been part of a marketing thing if it took off there.
Yep.
But I mean, that kind of led into wanting to understand the world and how it works. And at that point in time, you had a lot of VHS machines and answering machines that ran on tapes,
Okay.
and they would break,
Tape.
right?
Oh, tape. There's a common theme in many of these with tape.
It's an inside joke.
Yeah.
No, it's from our first podcast.
Yeah, it's from our first podcast.
Oh, nice.
But tape kept coming up.
That's
yeah.
funny. But I mean, you had this mechanical machine that had mechanical linkages, and it would have to handle this magnetic, what would you call it? Strip, right?
Mm-hmm.
And pull it into a read head. And if that didn't go perfectly, it would eat your tape, and it was a disaster, and people's favorite movies would get destroyed. And then they would, cuss at the machine and put it out at the
Their
street.
lifelong memories sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it
Yeah.
was their favorite movie, or maybe it was little Johnny's birthday party or something like that. So I learned how to open those things up and kind of refurbish them.
Okay.
And I started making money off of that. And I mean, that was really intriguing to me, because it's like, wow, I can make money doing this. And people are really, really happy that they don't have to go out and buy, $300-$400, VHS, whatever it was, JVC awesome box, again, because this one's broken. And, then that kind of progressed into computing. And I mean, you're talking about, like the earliest Macintosh and earliest, DOS computers, right? And I had a neighborhood friend who was kind of also had a common interest in that. And there was a computer recycling center that we were able to like pick up like the discard stuff that they didn't want.
Okay.
And so like that, we started tinkering with, discarded computer components. And I mean, little did we know, that would kind of emerge into kind of a career track, or kind of like a career mindset. And I mean, for me, it's been really exciting to understand the technology and then interface it to people. And I mean, that's part of the reason why like this topic today is so intriguing to me, is it's like bridging that gap between the tech side and the people side, and then seeing it really transform people's lives. I mean, I'm already starting to see people who are entering into retirement, and they're like, hey, I can go do Instacart on demand. Like I can make money on demand with this device in my hand.
Yeah.
And I mean, those kinds of things, they didn't exist, earlier in my life. And I love to be a part of seeing kind of like society emerge into, new levels of value add, or new levels of like, what does it mean to succeed? I mean, like, we're not an agrarian society where we have to go out and break our backs, harvesting the fields to have barely enough food to survive. Now we live in this world where we have all of this creative expression. We have all of these ways to be able to communicate or set up concepts that influence others. And I mean, I feel like the more the technology evolves in that direction, the more we're going to be able to see that continue to flourish. As far as like how people can reach me, I kind of laugh to myself, because I'm like, wow, I have a business card now. You guys.
I mean, do you have an Instagram?
I'm really not active on social media a lot. Yeah. I pulled away from it. And I think the reason I pulled away from it is kind of a signal to noise thing.
Okay.
Right? Like you were talking a lot about notifications, or like getting all of this instant communication. And I've tended to find that, a digital detox where it's like I'm choosing what's important in my life rather than just kind of letting it all barrage me. kind of like a signal to noise thing.
Yeah, I shut off all my notifications from like Facebook. And it's like I check my Facebook like when I get out of work,
Exactly.
and it's like, oh, I got 32 notifications. Cool.
So I mean, at this point, I do a lot of what I would call like direct digital communication.
Yeah.
But I don't really like post or consume. And I think it's kind of an interesting thing maybe to finish on. It's been proven, that like Instagram and Facebook are running these algorithms that give you a drip of a couple likes and a couple notifications because it's giving you.
Yeah, it's
serotonin.
like a dopamine.
Yeah, it's a hit.
Yeah.
Like you're getting your little hit. And, I'm very curious to see what the future holds for how these systems work, because as these things continue to emerge, what is considered to be like the best way of connecting with other people? Mm-hmm. And I mean, does a like or a little red notification, really do it for you, kind of a thing. Not to say that it's like good or bad, but I mean, at what point is it not adding value, to your life? So, I mean, if people want to get a hold of me, they can find me on social media, Nate Rinzema.
Yep.
Obviously with you guys here.
We'll put Nate's name in the notes, and we'll put an email address there for you as well.
Absolutely.
If people would like to reach out to you,
Sure.
To know more. But I think, Nate, thank you so much for being here to just talk technology and life with us. That's a lot of what we want to do, is just understand the things that we're all passionate equally about. So thanks so much for being here. We wish you the best in all of your ventures moving forward.
Well, thank you.
And we'll talk soon.
Yeah, so if you are listening to this on podcast, please make sure you give us a 5-star review and write a review. 5-star, hit subscribe. We are on Android Podcast. We are on Spotify, Apple.
Click them all.
Apple Podcast. Subscribe in all 3 locations. Make sure you comment. We're also on YouTube and Facebook at High Tech Simplicity. So those likes and those cares and the subscribes and the notification bells, you know what you're supposed to do. Hit them, smash them, like them, click them, whatever you want to refer to them as. Make sure you do that. And then we also have an email, info@hightechsimplicity. If there's someone or a topic you want us to talk about or talk to, make sure you email us or comment and let us know, because we would love to know what that is.
Yeah, and moving forward, if there is something that you don't agree with that we talked about today, or something you would like to add to what we're talking about, please feel free to send us a question. Send us a video clip of you asking a question or caring about what we're talking about. And me or Justin will respond. I would love to be sitting in an airport one day and get a question from you and respond to that in the airport about what we thought about what you had to say. Or if you think that we need to circle back on something and we need to bring Nate back for just a short session, all these things are things that we would really like to do to bring more information and more technology, I guess.
I look at it like this. Did you ever watch Mythbusters?
Yeah.
I remember watching Mythbusters and I loved it. And every once in a while they would do a myth where I go, well, you busted that myth, but you didn't try this, or this. And it was always so frustrating to me. And there was no way for me to like,
good follow-up.
Dear Jamie Heidemann, you suck because you didn't do this.
Yeah. So if I need to go fly a kite, please tell me.
Right.
And I would love to respond to you about how that flight went.
Right, exactly. So I think that's what we want to prevent. Like with the whole Scott thing, where it was Nicola and not Rivian. There was a couple things in there that were just like some people had some difference in opinions, and I think it would be really good to be able to have that conversation of like what we thought was different, maybe why he was wrong, or like, hey, I want to expound on what he said because Josh glazed over that really quick, and it was a good point, but like I think that deserves more intentionality there. So,
but a video question would be outstanding if we have that. We would love to respond to that. You can also soon here check us out on on TikTok.
Yes.
So we're going to have some more information, really small bits of information, primarily for me while I'm traveling, about stuff that maybe is irrelevant, something that is relevant, or just things that I'm frustrated with or happy about. So,
or think are cool.
Yeah. So, thanks so much for joining us today. We'll talk to you guys soon.
See ya.